today, the longtime editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, which has been one of the most anti-Trump magazines in the country. It was ground zero for some of the most deranged Russiagate hysteria. It was Jeffrey Goldberg who, during the 2020 election, claimed anonymously that Trump had disparaged the soldiers who died fighting as losers and suckers. And then in this election, he was the one who kept quoting General Milley and others, claiming, and General Kelly, claiming that Trump had said he admired Hitler and was a fascist. Talking about one of the most unscrupulous operatives in D.C. over the last 20 to 25 years, as well as one of the most vociferously anti-Trump ones. He wrote an article earlier today in The Atlantic, which, by the way, is owned by the billionaire heiress Laurene Powell Jobs, the widow of Steve Jobs, who inherited his billions. She became a major donor to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and she runs this magazine where he works. And here you see the headline of his article: "The Trump administration accidentally texted me its war plans." And here's what he writes, quote, "The world found out shortly before 2 p.m. Eastern time on March 15th that the United States is bombing Houthi targets across Yemen. I, however, knew 2 hours before the first bombs exploded that the attacks might be coming. The reason I knew this is that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, had texted me the war plan at 11:44 a.m. The plan included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing. This is going to require some explaining. On Tuesday, March 11th, I received a connection request on Signal from a user identified as Michael Waltz, the name of the Trump National Security Advisor. I accepted the connection request, hoping that this was the actual National Security Advisor and that he wanted to chat about Ukraine or Iran or some other important matter. 2 days later, Thursday at 4:28 p.m., I received a notice that I was to be included in a Signal chat group. It was called the, quote, Houthi PC small group. A message to the group from Michael Waltz read as follows: "Team, establishing a principals group for coordination on Houthis, particularly for over the next 72 hours. My deputy, Alex Wong, is pulling together a Tiger team at deputies and agency chief of staff level, following up from the meeting in the the situation room this morning for action items, and will be sending out that later this evening." The term Principals Committee generally refers to a group of the senior-most national security officials, including the Secretaries of Defense, State, and the Treasury, as well as the Director of the CIA. It should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that I have never been invited to a White House Principals Committee meeting, and that in my many years of reporting on national security matters, I had never heard of one being convened over a commercial messaging app. The principals had apparently assembled, and all 18 individuals were listed as members of this group. I appeared on my own screen as JG. At 8:05 a.m. on Friday, March 14th, Michael Waltz texted the group, quote, "Team, you should have a statement of conclusions with taskings per the president's guidance this morning in your high side inboxes." High side in government parlance refers to classified computer and communication systems. Now, this is shocking that it's not just one of a standard classified conversation. All conversations in Washington are classified. This is as sensitive as it gets. They are talking here about a surprise attack on a country that the United States was not bombing, and they were talking about the most precise, detailed operational aspects of this bombing campaign. Where they were going to bomb, exactly what time they were going to start bombing, which military weapons they were going to use to bomb. Obviously, anybody who gets this information and leaked it could sabotage the attack or put service members who are carrying it out in obvious danger. If the Houthis know exactly where planes are coming and what targets they're going to use, they could do all sorts of things to sabotage it. To put Jeffrey Goldberg into a top secret meeting, even though he has no top secret security clearance, seemingly by mistake, but who knows? That is incompetence and a security breach of the most extreme kind you can imagine. But that's something for other people to worry about. I'm not particularly concerned with national security breaches like that. I think way too much is classified, although even I generally on the far end of absolutism when it comes to state and government transparency, recognized, and I've always said, that of course there are some things that ought to be secret, some things that ought to be hidden. And one of those is troop movements. This would be like if you planned D-Day and you accidentally included Nazi sympathizing or communist sympathizing or anti-American journalists in your planning meeting. And they learned the details in advance of the invasion of Normandy. I mean, it's on that level of breach. But I'll let others worry about that. All of Washington is aflutter about that sort of thing. They pretend to love classified information and its sanctity when it suits them, although they leak classified information all the time when they perceive that suits them as well. What I'm more interested in is the debate that ensued, the conversation about the bombing attack and who said what, to get a glimpse into the mindset of Trump's national security team. So here's what Goldberg wrote, quote, "At this point, a fascinating policy discussion commenced. The account labeled JD Vance responded at 8:16, quote, team, I am out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we are making a mistake." And in parentheses, Goldberg says Vance was indeed in Michigan that day. The Vance account goes on to state, quote, 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez. 40% of European trade does. There's a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do so is, as POTUS said, to send a message. Now, on the one hand, this is not a very vehement objection. He wasn't pounding the table and saying this is wrong and we cannot do this. But you have to remember, J.D. Vance has a potentially purely empty and symbolic role in the Trump administration. He's the vice president. He really has no official duties. Whatever duties he gets, whatever influence he has is solely because Trump gives it to him. And therefore, he's always being quite careful not to seem like he's a radical dissident to the Trump agenda. But nonetheless, he and he alone did stand up and say, I think this is a mistake because there's no real U.S. interests involved here. We have a tiny amount of shipping that goes to the Suez. It's the Europeans who have enormous amounts, and why we're out there demanding that Europe take responsibility for its own defense and that we not bear the brunt of it anymore. Here we are about to do exactly that in a way that the public won't understand. Now, I guess you might consider it a coincidence, I don't, that the position of the Houthis under Trump has been not that we're going to attack American ships, but that we're only going to attack Israeli ships. To me, this is much more a bombing campaign designed to protect Israel than to protect the Europeans. No one's going to say that. No one's going to admit that. But that's the truth. And yet it was J.D. Vance, despite the extremely insignificant, almost trivial connection to U.S. interests, who stood up and said, this is wrong, this is a mistake. The Vance account then goes on to make a noteworthy statement, considering that the vice president has not deviated publicly from Trump's position on virtually any issue. Quote, I am not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I am willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself, but there is a strong argument for delaying this a month, doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is, etc. So he was essentially saying, this is wrong, I'm against it, but at least let's wait a month so we can figure out what we're really doing here. Like, why the urgency? Why the immediacy? At 8:27, a message arrived from the Pete Hegseth account. Quote, VP, I understand your concerns and fully support your raising with POTUS. Important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out. The economy, the Ukraine piece, Gaza, etc. I think messaging is what's going to be tough. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to stay focused on, one, Biden failed, and two, Iran funded. In other words, they have no way to explain to the American people why bombing the Houthis is in their interest, why bombing Yemen is in their interest. So Hegseth is saying, let's just simplify it and just avoid the real reasons and just say Biden failed, even though Biden actually bombed Yemen continuously throughout 2024. But this is always the Republican narrative. The Democrats are weak. They say Democrats and Biden were weak on Israel, even though the United States under Biden paid for Israel's entire war, funded and armed that war, diplomatically protected Israel every day at the UN. It was Obama who signed a deal on his way out of office with Netanyahu to give the Israelis $38 billion in military aid over 10 years. But of course, the Fox News Republican narrative always has to be, oh, the Democrats hate Israel, etc. Chuck Schumer, the highest ranking Democrat, has a book out warning of the anti-Semitism crisis that has engulfed America and said, my job is to make sure the left stays pro-Israel. The idea that the Democrats are weak on Israel or the Middle East or whatever is laughable. It's a joke. But Hegseth is saying that's how we have to sell it to the public. Biden failed, and let's scare them over the connection to Iran. The Hegseth message goes on to state, quote, waiting a few weeks or a month does not fundamentally change the calculus. Two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks, and we all looked indecisive. Two, Israel takes an action first, or a Gaza ceasefire falls apart, and we don't get to start this on our own terms. We can manage both. We are prepared to execute, and if I had final go or no-go vote, I believe we should. This is not about the Houthis. I see it as about two things. One, restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest, and two, reestablish deterrence, which Biden cratered. But we can easily pause, and if I do so, I will do all we can to enforce 100% OPSEC, operational security. I welcome other thoughts. Very ironic that Pete Hegseth is promising 100% OPSEC, operational security, on this plan when they're all doing this planning in front of an anti-Trump journalist that they have no idea has been invited by the National Security Advisor into this group, unwittingly or otherwise. Goldberg goes on, quote, it was the next morning, Saturday, March 15th, when the story became truly bizarre. At 11:44 a.m., the account labeled Pete Hegseth posted in Signal a, quote, team update. I will not quote from this update or from certain other subsequent texts. The information contained in them, if they had been read by an adversary of the United States, could conceivably have been used to harm American military and intelligence personnel, particularly in the broader Middle East Central Command's area of responsibility. What I will say, in order to illustrate the shocking recklessness of the Signal conversation, is that Hegseth the Hegseth post contained operational details of forthcoming strikes on Yemen, including information about targets, weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and attack sequencing. The only person to reply to the update from Hegseth was the person identified as the vice president. Quote, I will say a prayer for victory, Vance wrote. Two other users subsequently added prayer emojis. According to the lengthy Hegseth text, the first detonations in Yemen would be felt 2 hours hence at 1:45 p.m. Eastern Time. So I waited in my car in a parking lot of a supermarket. If this signal chat was real, I reasoned, Houthi targets would soon be bombed. At about 1:55, I checked X and searched Yemen. Explosions were then being heard across Sana'a, the capital city, which is how he knew that that chat was authentic. Now with the story, everyone's being asked about it. Absolutely nobody is denying that the chat is authentic. When the State Department spokesperson was asked why this happened, she simply said, we're not commenting on it. At Donald Trump's press appearance, which to his credit, he does essentially every day, in the Roosevelt Room, a reporter, in a very weird, timid way, asked Trump about this story, and Trump denied all knowledge of it. Here's what he said.
Your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
With the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Right. Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time. Anybody else?
The Atlantic article came out, and obviously everybody in Washington and political circles was talking about it. I don't doubt actually that Trump hasn't heard about it. Sometimes he doesn't follow the news cycle all that closely. But later after this, the White House put out a statement through Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, saying President Trump has full and complete confidence in his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, even though Mike Waltz added a journalist, a hostile journalist, to their planning for a new war. And that's illegal, by the way, to transmit classified information to someone not authorized to receive it. Pam Bondi, Tulsi Gabbard, others in the Trump administration have said they will have zero tolerance for leaks of classified information. They're lucky that Jeffrey Goldberg has a very similar foreign policy to people like Mike Waltz. He's obviously in favor of the bombing of Yemen because it helps Israel, whose foreign military he joined and served as a prison guard in an Israeli detention camp for Palestinians. And he's been an advocate of the Iraq War, did more than anybody to spread the lie that Saddam Hussein was involved in al-Qaeda in order to justify that war. So obviously it was safe in that sense because Jeffrey Goldberg was going to be a supporter of it. He has a very similar worldview to Mike Waltz. Both of them are standard GOP militarists and neocons. But still, it's a gigantic mistake at best, a huge national security breach. And had it been done with the wrong person, it could easily have put the lives of American troops in harm's way. And why were they using Signal? The government pays for extremely sophisticated classified networks to talk about these sorts of things on. And I consider Signal relatively safe of the commercial apps. It's probably the safest. It's the one I use when I'm having conversations that I don't want to be easily invaded, but it's far from invulnerable. Do you know scammers can literally steal your home right out from under you? The FBI calls it house stealing, and it's a growing real estate scam targeting American homeowners. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee, and then file it with your local recorder's office. Just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. They can then take out loans using your equity as collateral or even sell the property behind your back. And you won't even know it's happening until you start getting collection or foreclosure notices. Let me ask you, when was the last time you checked your home title? If you're like me, the answer is never. And that's exactly what these scammers are counting on. That's why I trust Home Title Lock. Their $1 million triple lock protection helps keep your home and equity safe. Here's what you get. Immediate 24/7 monitoring of your property, so if there's any changes to your title, you get immediately notified. Urgent alerts if there are any changes. And if fraud should happen, then their US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title at no additional cost. And here's the best part. I've teamed up with Home Title Lock to give you a free title history report, free. So you can find out if you're already a victim and access to your personal title expert, a $250 value just for signing up. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and use my promo code GG250 or click on the link in the description. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code GG250 to get the protection and peace of mind that you deserve. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.